So just really briefly, while I'm getting my slides up, I'll just chat. I know we're short on time. I am a faculty member in the School of Language and Liberal Studies, and I also coordinate one of our postgraduate certificate programs, which is research and evaluation. So the wonderful thing about my particular program in research and evaluation is that my students already have degrees and diplomas, but from really diverse backgrounds. Technically, evaluation is an applied psychology discipline, but my students come in with backgrounds including like pharmaceutical, civil engineering, social work. One of my students this term is a trained lawyer. So they're interesting and they know really great stuff. And so something that I have found really beneficial about a platform like Riipen is that it allows me to give students authentic, real-world projects that really require them to flex the skill set that they already have before they even got to our program. So here we go. Sorry, my slides are just right here. Oh, gosh. Here we go. Take two. Here we go. So I have already shared with you the context, so I'll just move forward. There we go. So what I do, just in terms of how I personally scaffold them, although my students are required in the winter semester to complete a capstone, and I think probably everybody here knows what a capstone is, but I found a couple of years ago that the capstone courses weren't going particularly well because they really required students to have a lot of skills that they didn't have. And so now what I do is I use Riipen pretty much exclusively for one of our first semester communication classes. And technically the course is audience analysis. So thinking about who your audience is and how to tailor information for that audience. So when I'm selecting Riipen projects, I am looking for projects that are primarily writing based, but that require them to do some degree of tailoring for a very specific audience. I divide my students into small groups, and then each of those small groups will have their own specific Riipen project, which means that in a given semester, I am typically working with, let's say, 3 to 6 or 7 Riipen partners. And all of them, it's a writing class, it's a communication class, will culminate in a final report. So in terms of some of the companies I've worked with, has been really exciting for me because I think that Riipen really provides a lot of exciting options for students who are potentially remote, online, asynchronous, here in London. Riipen allows you to work with partners who are not necessarily based in London or Ontario or Canada. And I think that's great for students to get exposure to global environments, but also different corporate cultures. So Together Well, for instance, which is a logo in your top left, they are a California-based 501c3, which is a US nonprofit. AGM at Servio Global Ministries was also based out of Virginia. So that was really exciting for students. Most of the other companies on here are Ontario-based, with the exception of YYC Beeswax, which is based in Calgary, which you may know if you travel a lot. YYC is the airport code, I believe, for Calgary. So these are just some of the companies that students have worked with. And I really like Riipen projects because in terms of students, I love that Silex projects or experiential learning projects or just in general, Riipen projects like this, they're messy. And I use that word very deliberately. When you give students an assignment or a rubric, you've already thought about the problems. You've already thought about the obstacles or things that will happen. In these real world projects, things go wrong all the time. And that mimics what happens in the workplace. But it also requires students to develop really tangible soft skills in conflict resolution, communication, even just thinking through, what do I actually need to know to answer this question? Because at least in the way I frame my Riipen projects, I really do require students to do a lot of their own communication by at least deciding what information do we need to answer this. So as a result, they really improve a lot of their metacognition skills. I always make students do a short reflection paper after the Riipen project is done, in which I ask them to reflect on the experience. And they all cite that they gained really specific skills. And a lot of them will share that they learned things about themselves that they didn't even know to be true. So that really helps the capstone then in the second semester because they've learned how to work through something that is a little bit unpredictable. And then, of course, this probably came up before I got here, but students benefit because this is something that they can put on their CV. They can speak directly to this in a cover letter. And most often, community partners are willing to provide a reference for students if they are happy with the project. I personally haven't had any stakeholders that haven't wanted to provide a reference, so that's been great. I've also had a few opportunities spin out into not full co-ops, but some part-time job opportunities or some additional learning opportunities for students, which is exciting. And from my perspective, I really benefit because I learn so much from the community partners that I work with. All the time, I'm being exposed to new software, new project management platforms. They'll often share with me how they organize work within their own company or organization. And it is actually a direct result of a Riipen project that I now exclusively use Basecamp for project management. I make students use it. I grade them on their use of Basecamp. And I only learned, again, through this project that it is free for educators. So Basecamp normally comes with a fairly significant fee, actually. I think it's $20 or $30 a month, but for educators, it is free. So that's been really, really, really beneficial. And I just, in general, I'm a convert. I also benefit from knowing a little bit more about industry trends, right? In terms of myself as a professor, most of what I do is teach. Most of what I read are education journals or curriculum or pedagogy-based research. And so it's great to remind me of the end result of where my students are going. So what do they need to know? I also learn a lot about what current industries think new graduates lack as skills, because that will come up in our scoping meetings when we're trying to decide whether or not it's a good fit. I'll hear from them directly that they're finding when they hire students that they can't do X, Y, Z. That's great for me to know as an educator, because then I can make sure students can do X, Y, Z. I also learn a lot about hiring practices and conventions, which again, I find really useful to bring into the classroom, because then I can share with students, here's what companies that will go on to hire students like you are expecting to see in your cover letter, your CV, your experience, etc. And more broadly, I just really benefit from networking. I have gotten to know so many really great, founders of startups. I've gotten to know more faculty at the college. I've gotten to work more closely with other coordinators. I just, in general, think it's a really great opportunity to get to know other people who are interested in these kinds of community partnerships. Because I think sometimes the perception is that the Riipen recipient, like the company working with Riipen, is the one that's gaining a lot because they're getting the research or the project, and they're unpaid mostly. So, but I would actually argue it's very reciprocal. We gain just as much as we give back to the partners, and all the students cite it as a highlight. So Riipen in general, I think as a platform makes it fairly easy. And I'm not somebody who has really leaned a lot on all of the staff, but they do have a lot of staff who are willing to onboard you, help you set up your course, help you set up your curriculum. And I do really love that makes it easier for faculty who may be newer or a little bit less familiar, that they have this ability to do that. So I do very much appreciate that. And with that, I am done.